All right, inshallah. Let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Salatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Everybody, inshallah, everyone's doing well. Everyone is in good health and in good faith, good iman. Obviously, our faith and our hope, our optimism is being tested on like a weekly basis, right? Because of all the difficulties that we're seeing. But inshallah, all of this is a part of a greater purpose, right? That's what continues to keep us going. That's what continues to give us hope. That's what continues to allow us to wake up a next day after seeing things that no human being really is used to seeing, right? Or should be used to seeing. When you see pictures and videos of heinous crimes and families being ripped apart, children being tormented and tortured, the heart can become almost numb to everything that it sees. And so first and foremost, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from ever losing that sense of awareness of what's going on, right? Because there is this concept of being overwhelmed to the point where you become almost insensitive. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the continuous strength and the continuous ability to feel for the people of Palestine, and continue to allow us to make dua for them and be one ummah, right? This is like shaitan's greatest, his greatest effort is to try and make everyone feel so hopeless that they end up becoming disconnected, right? That through this lack of hope that everyone becomes to, this people that just doesn't ever want to get up and do anything, right? They don't want to get out of bed. They don't want to go out and be with community. They don't want to go out and see people that are good for them. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from ever falling into the traps of shaitan. Ameen. So we'll inshallah continue today, and we'll make a dua for the people of Gaza at the end of our session, as we usually do now, alhamdulillah, at the end of every Roots gathering. So we begin, and we are actually, alhamdulillah, more than halfway through the series. So the game plan, inshallah, is to wrap up before the month of Ramadan. And obviously the month of Ramadan presents a whole new vibe here at Roots. And so inshallah, we're going to be continuing on with our Ramadan programming. And then we'll begin a new soul food series after Ramadan concludes. So we're on chapter 5.3. So chapter 5.3, it talks about the excellence of drawing close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something we call taqreeb, which means like the proximity that one has with God. Okay? And he first and foremost begins by quoting a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, by the way, a part of a greater narration that I'll read out for you guys. So this hadith, it comes from a companion by the name of Abu Dharr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who reports that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that Allah said. So it's like three layers, right? The first layer is that a companion narrates something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, like any other narration. But the second layer is obviously the Prophet ﷺ. The third layer in Hadith Qudsi is that the Prophet ﷺ, he says that Allah said, okay? Because usually Hadith have two layers, the narrator and then the Prophet ﷺ. With the Hadith Qudsi is that the narrator said that the Prophet said that Allah said. So it's one layer higher, okay? It's not a word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's in the Quran, and the Quran is unequivocal, there's no question about it. A hadith Qudsi is something that the Prophet said that Allah said. Okay? So it's not in the Quran, it's preserved in a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he says that Allah Azza wa Jal, he mentions, whoever comes with a good deed will have the reward of 10 like it or even more. Okay? And then he says, whoever comes with an evil deed will be recompensed for one evil deed like it, or he will be forgiven. Meaning that a person who comes with one good deed, Allah Ta'ala will reward them even more so than whatever one good deed that they did. But at the same time, if a person comes with one evil deed, Allah will only give them one bad deed that will be held accountable to them. Or Allah Ta'ala will just forgive that entire thing totally. And he says, whoever draws close to me by the length of a hand, I will draw close to him by the length of an arm. Okay? And then he says, whoever draws close to me by the length of an arm, I will draw close to him or her by the length of a fathom. And by the way, the word fathom is not something that we commonly hear. So the word fathom actually means like twice the length of an arm span, right? So if you consider an arm span from the shoulder to the tips of your finger, a fathom would be two of those, right? Almost like an entire wingspan. And then he says, whoever comes to me walking, I will come towards them running. And whoever meets me with enough sins to fill the entire dunya, but they don't associate any partners with me, I will meet them with as much forgiveness as they can imagine that is contained in the entire dunya. So I want you to think what this hadith is trying to relate to us. Number one is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always making movement towards a believer, right? This concept that we are people who are moving towards Allah and Allah is stationary is actually incorrect. Because the hadith proves that whoever is trying at any level to get closer in proximity to God, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually making leaps and bounds beyond whatever effort that you're putting in. And he mentions that, right? Whoever's trying to get closer to me by an arm span, I will get closer to him by double of that, or two of those, right? And so there's another version of this hadith, and you guys can read it right here, where it says that in Musnad Imam Ahmad, it says that the narration mentions that Allah is more exalted and greater. Allah is more exalted and greater. And that means that whatever effort that you're trying to put in, Allah will put that much more. Whatever step you take, Allah will take a step further than that. And we'll talk a little bit about this, inshallah, as we continue on. So he then continues, and he says, Ibn Rajab, he quotes this beautiful poem, and I wanted to kind of share this poem with everybody. He begins by saying, whoever turns towards us, and he's speaking from the perspective of God, he's saying, whoever turns towards us, we will receive him willingly from afar. I want you guys to think about that line. Whoever just turns towards Allah, Allah will receive them willingly from afar. What kind of relationships in this dunya exist that are like that? It's very hard to find. That when a person just turns towards another person, that they notice it right away and they receive them from a distance away. Most people nowadays, subhanAllah, we live in such a distant world, right? We live in a world of text messages and DMs and whatever, Instagram post and this and that, all that stuff. And it almost takes, even if a person's standing right in front of you, we don't notice them anymore. Even if a person's actually saying, hey, I'm right here in front of you, we don't notice them anymore. So that should teach you what the relationship of a person and Allah is. That he's saying that if a person even turns towards Allah, they're standing facing away from God, but they turn towards him, they put their face towards him, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will receive them from afar. Allah will notice that you look towards him and Allah will receive you. How many of you guys have ever received or picked up a friend from an airport? It's not and if you're ever excited to pick up a friend from an airport, you're there before that flight lands. You're checking that flight number all the way, right? Oh, they're over Atlanta, Georgia right now, right? They're going to be landing in T-minus hour and 30 minutes. As soon as they land at DFW, they're like, hey, assalamu alaikum, I landed. You're like, yeah, I'm already here at the terminal. I'm waiting for you, right? What gate are you going to come out of? That's the culture and the attitude of a person who's excited to see someone. And so when you look at this poem and you see how Allah feels about you, Allah is saying that when you even make a gesture towards me, it doesn't matter if you're far away still, right? Because that's the shaitani trick. Shaitan wants you to think that it's not even worth turning towards Allah because you're so far away already. What's the point? What's the point of even turning towards God? You're 8 miles away. You're 100 miles away. Even if you turn towards him, how long is it going to take for you to even take the first step towards Allah? And then shaitan's going to make you compare yourself to every other believer. Shaitan's going to make you look at the person next to you and say, look, that person prays more than you do. So Allah will make more time for that person. Or that person, they've memorized more Quran than you. So Allah will make more time for that person. And what this person has fundamentally failed to realize is that Allah can make equal time for everyone because He is Allah. That entire narration that there is not a leaf that falls on the ground besides which the Allah already has knowledge of it. Isn't that proof enough that Allah Ta'ala can spend just as much time with A and B? Isn't that enough proof that Allah can spend as much time with a person who has known Him for 80 years and the same amount of time can be given to a person who just met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yesterday? You know, a lot of people sometimes, unfortunately, in the community, we project our feelings and we kind of attribute them to Allah, right? Like, oh yeah, Allah will never forgive you for that. Allah will never be able to forgive you for this. A'udhu billah. No, what you're saying is that you wouldn't forgive somebody for that. What you're saying is that you have a lack of mercy in your own heart where you have a hard time understanding how anyone can forgive somebody who did X, Y, and Z. But a person who is a true believer, a person who truly understands the scope and the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never ever doubt Allah's ability to go and spend time with anyone. Because Allah can do that. So whoever turns towards us, we receive him or her willingly from afar. And then he says, whoever desires what we want, we desire what they want, whatever he or she wants. And this portion right here proves to us that if you want to ask yourself, how close am I to Allah? You should ask yourself, where do I put Allah on my list of priorities? Right? Like how close am I to God? Well, how much does He mean to you? You want to gain that taqreeb, that closeness to Allah Azza wa Jal? Ask yourself, how much do you prioritize the things that Allah Ta'ala loves? And that's why, by the way, I continue to give the example of following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, imagine if a person on the Day of Judgment doesn't come with very much, right? I mean, we're all fallible, blameworthy people, right? If Allah Ta'ala were to hold us accountable for every single sin that we committed, there would be no chance that we would get into paradise. That's the entire premise of this entire book. Al-Mahajja fi Sayyid al-Dulja, this book that Ibn Rajab he wrote, is based off the entire premise that a person cannot solely rely upon their deeds to enter Jannah. They need the mercy of God to enter Jannah, right? So imagine if a person goes up to Allah Ta'ala on the Day of Judgment and they say to Allah, Ya Allah, I don't know very much. I've never been like an alim. I've never been like a pious person per se. I used to always be looked down upon by other people. I never really met the approval of other people in the community. But I'll tell you, Ya Allah, something that I really tried hard in my life. And Allah will say, what was that? Ya Abd, what was it? And the servant will say, Ya Allah, I tried to follow every example of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So you may have failed to do all the other things that everybody else does, but you tried your hardest to follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You tried your hardest. And because of the love that Allah has for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah will allow you to enter into the folds of His Jannah. Because you've loved something that He loved. Isn't that always one of the recipes to gain closeness with somebody? Is to love something that they love. We do this with our friends all the time, right? You're sitting there eating some sort of food. You're at this restaurant and their friend's looking over to you. They're like, yeah, isn't it great? And you're like, it's amazing. You're like, oh gosh, I can't wait to come back here. I wouldn't mind coming back here next year at some point, right? I mean, the way you grow closeness is by investing in interests of the people that you love, right? I mean, I have a 1.5-year-old daughter at home right now. She gets so excited showing her Baba the small little wooden block piece that she found in the corner of the living room. And she's like, Papa, look. And I'm like, whoa, my gosh, subhanAllah, right? Like, what amazing, right? She now has discovered the whole what's it called? The Etch-a-Sketch thing, right? Like when you're drawing little things on that little board that you can erase with that slider. And she like starts like, I mean, this girl has no coordination yet. She's 1.5. Calm down. So she's like just trying to figure out how to draw anything of any shape whatsoever. And I look at her, subhanAllah, the other day, you know what she did? She made something, and she knows a few words now, right? Although at 1.5 years. So she draws something, and her favorite thing right now is a caterpillar. You know, the very hungry caterpillar. She loves that story. And so she loves apples, because apples is one of the things that caterpillar ate. And so she drew something, and she goes, Papa, apple? And I'm looking at like one giant squiggly line. And I'm like, oh yeah, apple. And then she got so excited, right? But even though I knew that there was nothing that resembled an apple on that thing, I told her exactly what she wanted me to place emphasis on, which is that she tried drawing an apple. So imagine the same thing works with Allah. You don't have to understand everything about the religion. You don't have to. It's actually not even possible for a person to understand everything. There are even scholars, ulama, that still study certain parts of the religion that are difficult for the mind to comprehend. But the question is, can you submit to Allah? Even without your understanding, can you submit to Allah? I gave you guys the example of salah the other day. You can pray all 17 raka'ah of your salawat in one setting. And you could say, well, Allah, you wanted me to pray 17 raka'ahs, right? Instead of splitting it over 5 prayers, I just prayed it at Fajr. No. It's not about your logic. It's about submission to God. That you submit to Allah with Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. So you want to know how close you are to Allah? Ask yourself, where do you prioritize Allah in your life? Okay? And then he says, we desire what He wants, whoever asks of us. Okay? So you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Or sorry, whoever asks of us, we shall grant him more and more again. The middle line's right here. Whoever asks of us, we shall grant him or her more and more again. This is what Allah is talking about when He says that you come to me by a arm span, I will come to you by twice that. So you ask of me, I will give you more than whatever your mind can comprehend. And this is true belief in the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is limitless. How many of y'all have ever thought of yourself to make a dua that was like almost impossible? You're like, yeah, there's no way this is happening, right? I'm going to make dua to Allah that Allah allows me to become this person, that gets this job, that has this career, that gets married at this age, and has this type of family and gets out of this difficult situation. Allah, the poem, he says that, no. The way that Allah functions is that the more you ask Him, the more that Allah Ta'ala will give you. Again, do not project human tendencies to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because if a person asks somebody for a favor, that person may give it to them the first time, the second time, even the third time. But there comes a point where a human being may ask another human being for something where that person says, well, that's way too much for me to give you. Haven't I done enough? How many times have you guys given your friends rides, and that third time of asking, you're like, all right, when's this person gonna get a car? Right? Like, when is this person gonna like figure something out where I'm not the only person who has to give them rides? Does it happen the second time? Does it happen the third time? Does it happen the fourth time? The point is that there will be a time where the human being will run out of their patience. But with Allah, you have to understand that no matter how much you ask, Allah Ta'ala will never run out of that patience for you. You can ask Allah for something that you deem as crazy. You would call in your mind crazy, right? And you look at I always share the dua of Nabi Musa alayhi salam, where Musa alayhi salam at one point made a dua for something that seemed almost impossible, right? Almost impossible. He made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him bravery to face the Fir'aun. رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Oh Allah, allow my chest to be filled with bravery. رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي. Expand my chest. وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي. And make easy for me my task. وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي. And untie the knot in my tongue. يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. So they may understand what I say. And Prophet Musa alayhi salam, by the way, was extremely nervous at the time of this dua because Allah had just commanded him to go and confront Fir'aun. An impossible task. Imagine if somebody would tell you right now, go up to Benjamin Netanyahu and tell him that he's like the devil. And all those Instagram posts are now coming to life, right? You're like, okay, this is it, right? This is it. I can't chicken out now. I got to go say to him exactly what I've been posting about for the past like month. And at that point, imagine how many people would be like, no, I can't do it. I'm too scared. I can't do it. I'm too scared. Almost an impossible task, right? Go up to them and tell them that what they're doing is wrong. This is the same exact thing that Prophet Musa was facing. How can I go up to Fir'aun? By the way, you know, anybody who's trying to make sense of this like whole Palestine crisis right now that's going on, please go and read the accounts of Fir'aun and the people of Bani Israel. Oh, it's so shockingly similar. It's so shockingly similar. A person who is in love with their own pride, who's in love with their own image, who's in love with their own power. They're killing and destroying at will with no remorse whatsoever. This literally is the story of Fir'aun. It's so incredible, subhanAllah, how history repeats itself. And so Allah, He says, whoever asks of us, we will grant him more and more. Again, our giving is limitless. And the last line of the poem is, whoever works seeking our aid, we will make soft for him even iron. Meaning that whoever works, whoever does righteous deeds, seeking my help, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Whatever you do, you seek Allah's help in it. How many of y'all have done this in your life? You've gone to work and you said, oh Allah, help me get through this day. You're about to take an exam. Oh Allah, help me get through this exam. You have a big interview. Oh Allah, help me get through this interview. Anyone who seeks the help of Allah, anyone who seeks the nasr of Allah, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, right? Whoever seeks the help of Allah, know that Allah will make for this person possible that which they deemed impossible. How many things, because a person called upon Allah, became possible for them, but a day ago they thought was completely impossible? There's no way I'll pass this exam. There's no way I'll get that job. There's no way that there will be a ceasefire. How many times have people said stuff like that? And because of the help of Allah, it came eventually. Because of that help of Allah, you passed that exam. Because of the help of Allah, you were able to, with that aid, get that job, rekindle that relationship. And there's a very beautiful ayah in the Quran that illustrates this. If anybody wants to look into it, it's actually in Surah Al-Talaq, a surah that talks about divorce, one of the hardest subjects to ever tackle as a Muslim. So many intricate details of it. Allah, He mentions, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He says, anyone, whoever has consciousness of God, يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. We will make for them an exit, a way out of their difficult situation. But you have to have Allah in mind. If you ever think that your difficult situation will be relieved by another person or another source, know that your hopes are misplaced. If you think that Joe Biden is going to call for a ceasefire, Habibi, think again. If you think that, some random person in leadership is going to come out and say like, yes, I demand this and this is going to stop because I wanted to stop, understand that your hopes are misplaced. But for a person who puts their hopes in God, Allah will find for them a way out. Because that way out, even for the human being, seems impossible. Even for people, subhanAllah, this is why human beings will always be short-sighted. Human beings will never see the full scope of everything. I always teach this ayah and I give everyone this kind of like visual in their head. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. It's like when a person is walking through a hallway. When they're walking through a hallway and all they see in every side of them is like brick walls, no windows, no doors, nothing. And they get to the end of that hallway and they see a dead end. They see a dead end. They see no end in sight. They see no way out. Because that person is only looking straight. They're not looking up. But when a person says, I believe in God, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, I believe in Allah. Allah will come to them and just gently lift their chin, allowing them to look up, and then they'll finally realize a place that they thought was a dead end actually has a way out that I can climb over. But I never saw it before I asked Allah. I never was able to see that exit point before I asked Allah. I thought every place was a solid dead end. And then Allah continues in Surah Al-Talaq, وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And we will make for them, or we will provide for them from places that they thought was impossible. They never thought it was possible. Subhanallah. You know, you guys ever read Surah Al-Fil before? The story of the people of the elephant, the year that the Prophet ﷺ was born, right? These people came marching upon the Kaaba looking to destroy it. And all of the Meccans, they fled from their homes because they were afraid of being destroyed by the people of this group, Ashab al-Fil. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did He send upon them? وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ. We sent upon them an army, a flock of birds. تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ. And all they had were some like pebbles, some, small little stones that were baked from like clay. And all these people were completely destroyed beyond even the ability to identify them. You couldn't even tell who they were after Allah got done with them. So if you kind of read this story on paper, you think to yourself, you're like, man, like, what's going to stop this like Israeli occupation? What's going to stop this horrific oppression? وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ. Don't be surprised if like a flock of birds comes and destroys Benjamin Netanyahu. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. Ameen. I'm glad everyone said Ameen. It's not a joke, right? 100% we're being serious, right? What is it, a sparrow, a chickadee? I don't care. Subhanallah, so you think to yourself that you ask Allah, it's not impossible, okay? And so then He continues, subhanallah, this part always gets to me. You continue and you read, Ibn Rajab, he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, were you to go to the door of the governor, he would not receive you or give you any attention. Perhaps he will even prevent you from getting near to him. How many times has this happened to us, right? No, I just need to talk to the director for like 1 minute. That's it. I just need to talk to like my teacher for 1 second. And the security guard steps in. Who are you? What's your name? Are you on the list? I don't see your name here. Go on. You can submit an email and we'll get to you if we get to you. This is what like royalty is treated like in this dunya, right? Like when you want to talk to somebody who's like famous, you have to go through like some really long, drawn out process of, reaching out to like their booking agent and this and that, all that stuff. And, going to the line at 5 a.m. in the morning before Fajr Salah, just so you can go and meet this person. So Ibn Rajab, he brings this up. He says, were you to go to a door of a governor or a famous person, he would not even receive you, nor would he even give you any attention. How many of y'all, subhanAllah, have ever really looked up to somebody and when you went to meet them, they didn't even like notice you? How like disheartening is that, right? Like you're like, oh my God, like I watched all your videos and like I follow you on Instagram and TikTok and like these girls are all laughing. They're like, oh my God, the pain is so raw. How does he know? Like I remember, like I watch everything. I follow you like every day. I wait till your video comes out and all these different things. And man, subhanAllah, can I tell you guys a story? Oh God, this is being live streamed. I hate this. I'll keep it generic. When I was younger, I used to like be a part of like a youth group. And I used to put together a lot of like cool events for like, young Muslims. And I remember there was a particular person who was coming into town and every girl on the planet was like excited. They were like, oh, we want her to sign her hijab. Like just losing their minds. And the day, that the event took place, they made like one request. They're like, please, can you like organize like a private lunch where like we can like spend time with her? And I said, yeah, for sure, man. Like 100%, I got y'all, right? And event was over. The lunch happened. These girls were like, mashallah, like waiting. Like, right? Like it was like they were like waiting to do tawaf around the Kaaba. They were waiting to get into the Rawda in Medina. And the day after, I asked them, I said, well, how was it? And they all came to me with like the worst faces of all time. They're just looking down. Nobody wanted to speak. And I said, what happened, guys? And they're like, it was just not it. This is before it was not it was invented. They're just like, yeah, that wasn't worth it. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, she just like ignored us the entire time we were sitting eating lunch. She was on her phone the entire time. And at that moment, subhanAllah, I thought to myself, how lucky are we to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You know, when like you put all of your hopes and dreams in people, people will always fail you guys. They'll always fail you. Yeah, there will be moments where sometimes people will come to you and you will have all of your expectations met, right? Like when Sheikh Omar came to Roots a month ago and you said salam to him, Sheikh Omar was so kind and said, wa alaikum salam, and you're like, oh my God, alhamdulillah. Maybe I'll be the one that's floating in Jannah next time in the next Ramadan series, right? and you'll have those moments, right? Like when, you know, Sheikh Yasser comes in and or Sheikh Abdul Nasir, Mufti Kamani, whoever, Sheikh Mikael comes and says salam to you after their halaqah, you're like, alhamdulillah, like that's a good day, right? But there will be a time where some people will be in a rush, right? You'll wanna ask a question to one of these teachers and they'll be like, no, you know, like my wife is texting me because my kid's losing their mind. I gotta go home right now. And you'll say to yourself, oh no, I waited so long to ask this person a question. I want you to remind yourself that this is why Allah is Allah and human beings are human beings. When you place all of your hopes in human beings, sometimes there will be moments of disappointment. But when you place your hopes in Allah, Allah will always come through for you. Allah will always make time for you. Allah will always be the one who meets you at the appointed time. And if you don't mind me sounding like an old uncle for a minute, it is, those times are your Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. You actually have standing meetings with Allah every day. You just don't realize it. You have meetings with Allah every day that you didn't even ask for. Allah made those appointments with you. You know, we make appointments with like people of high status. Allah made appointments with you. So how do you think Allah feels about you? And sometimes we actually are the ones who don't show up to our appointments with Allah. Allah may have been waiting for us at those appointments. At sunset every day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala waited. I know that they're going to show up. I know that they'll come around. I know they'll make time. Even if it's right before the time of prayer ends, I know they'll make their meeting. And some of us, unfortunately, we fail to meet Allah when we promise that we meet Him. That same disappointment that you feel when like a person doesn't meet you when they promise to meet you, I want you to ask yourself, how do you think we should feel when we fail to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at a time when He told us that this is a time that I want to meet with you? We ask Allah to protect us from ever neglecting Allah. Ameen. And so here He continues and He says, but the King of Kings, Allah Azza wa Jal, is saying, whoever comes to me walking, I will go to them running. Yet you turn away from Him and run after another. So what's that another for you? Is that another a job? Is that other, luxury? Is that other leisure? Is that other sleep? Is that other a friend or a person that you prioritize? What is that other? And He says that you've been cheated in the worst manners. Ibn Rajab, he says, you've been cheated in the worst manner and you have lost out in the most severest of ways. Like that TV episode that you watched over your Maghrib Salah, oh, you will never ever get that one Maghrib Salah back. I want you guys to think about that, right? Because when you miss a prayer, what do you pray in lieu of it? You pray qada, right? You pray qada. You will never actually ever get back that original prayer that you missed. When a person misses that one Maghrib prayer or that one Asr prayer, yeah, you can do qada, but there's a different reward for that. You will not get the same reward for the person who prayed on time, at that day. You missed out on it. And that's the whole trick of shaitan, right? Shaitan will tell you, no, man, like LeBron, man, he's like 80 years old. He's only gonna play another year, man. Like, you gotta catch that LA game. You gotta catch that game, man. Like LeBron, Jiddo LeBron is like only gonna be playing for so long, right? No. You know what? Like, you can always go back and rewatch his highlights. You can always go back and rewatch that game that you missed on NFL Sunday Ticket. You can always go back and catch that interview. But you will never be able to go back and spend that beautiful Asr prayer that you missed on that day in November. Because once that Asr prayer is gone, all you're left with is just praying that makeup prayer if you can. So don't cheat yourselves out of those opportunities. Those opportunities are so sweet. You know those moments where you tell people that the only way to describe a certain experience is that you just had to be there? Y'all know those feelings? Oh, you just had to be there. You guys ever had to explain to a friend? Like they ask you, like, oh, no, what was it like? You know, what was it like being there? Oh, you just had to be there. I can't even explain to you. Those are the types of emotions that we want to host when we talk about those prayers with Allah, those meetings with Allah. I want you to think about one of the most beautiful salahs that you ever prayed in your life. Can you ever begin to describe that via words to a person? You can't. You cannot. You think one thing that I will, share with you guys, some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that you read and you're blown away by them? Like the Prophet describes one of the prayers that he prayed during his lifetime. If you think that that description was incredible, think about what he actually went through that he didn't describe. Think about what he experienced that he couldn't describe with his own words. Allah give us those experiences. Ameen. And so he quotes another poem here. He says, by Allah, I have never come to visit you, except that I have found the earth compacting for me. And never have I resolved to leave your door, Ya Allah, except that I tripped over my own garments. What does that mean? It means that every time you make time for Allah, Allah will change the earth for you to be able to meet Him. You want to know a story about that? There's a hadith that talks about this. A man who killed 99 people. He killed 99 people, and one day he resolved to change his ways. I'm done with this life. I don't want to continue doing this again. I don't want to continue living this lifestyle anymore. I want to be with Allah now. And so he goes to some pious people and he says to them, Ya Shaykh, is there any chance for me to turn back to Allah, that Allah will, give me my forgiveness that I seek? And they said, the first person said no. He was so taken aback by the crime that he committed. 99 people you killed. How? There's no way that you'll be forgiven for this stuff. And he got so frustrated, he said, and one narration mentions that he actually killed that man out of frustration. And then he goes up to the second sheikh and he says, Sheikh, is there any way that I'll be forgiven for the crimes that I've committed? And the sheikh, he said, Allah is always capable of forgiving anybody for what they've done. Don't ever get that twisted. But you have to do something as well. So what do I have to do? I want to change. He said, you have to start fresh. Leave from the place that you have accumulated so much memory of all of the sins that you've committed. He says, so head towards a new place. Start fresh. Begin anew. And so he began his journey. And upon this journey, in the middle of his route, Allah Ta'ala took his life. He died. And so the hadith mentions that 2 angels came to meet him at his death. And upon his death, these 2 angels began to argue. One angel was an angel of mercy, and one angel was an angel of punishment. And these 2 angels began to argue against one another. And they said, no, he's ours. And the other one said, no, he's ours. He's ours to take for mercy. And the other angel said, no, he's ours to take for punishment. And so Allah Azza wa Jal sent a 3rd angel to arbitrate between these 2. And the 3rd angel, he said, measure wherever he was. If he was closer to the destination, we will take him as a person that has been forgiven. If he was closer to his original spot, we will take him as a person who will be punished. And this is where the riwayah actually breaks off into 2 possibilities. Number 1 is that he was found just a little bit closer to his destination, and so the angels of mercy took him as a person who was forgiven. The other narration mentions that he was in fact right in the middle. Right in the middle. And the narration mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He moved the earth. So he ended up being closer to his final destination. That once Allah moved the earth, he was closer to his end goal than he was to his beginning. Which is a direct manifestation of this poem. By Allah, I have never come to visit you, except that I have found the earth compacting for me. The earth moved for me, Ya Allah, so I can meet you. Look at Prophet Musa and the Red Sea. Prophet Musa made one dua and the sea moved itself for him. The Prophet ﷺ made certain du'as in his life and certain miracles of the earth happened because he wanted to be closer to God. You try to get closer to God, Allah will move mountains for you. Think about how many times in your life where you thought to yourself, man, I work such a busy shift, I work such a busy schedule, there is no way I'll be able to pray my prayers throughout a day. But you prioritize Allah and all of a sudden, your shift changed. Your boss said, oh no, it's okay. Take 5 minutes to pray Dhuhr. We'll change it around for you. The dunya will change for you. Don't worry. The dunya is moldable. That's the thing. The dunya is moldable. The deen, it's set. The time of prayer will not change. The dunya will change to fit those times of prayer. And then the opposite is also true where he says, and never have I resolved to leave your doors, Ya Allah, except that I tripped over my own garments. Why do you all think he used the phrase, tripped over my own garments? Anybody want to share an insight here? Why? Why didn't he say that, and never have I resolved to leave your door except that I tripped? Why did he say I tripped over my own garments? Why? Anybody? Yeah?
I was going to say, if you trip, I feel like it's kind of like you can always get back up, and then your own garments is like your own mistakes and your own faults.
Subhanallah. The first one was profound. If you trip, you can always get back up, right? And the second, he said that if you trip over your own garments, it may have been your own fault, right? Beautiful. Yes? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. She said that in Islam, sometimes garments are actually used to, describe protective agents, right? Hunna libasun lakun wa antum libasun lahun. Allah talks about a couple that's married, right? That you should be a garment for her and she will be a garment for you. That you guys should be protections for one another. So she mentioned, mashallah, that a person who relies upon their own protection, they will always trip over their own protection. They'll always trip over their own plans. They'll always trip over their own ideas. But if you rely upon the protection of Allah, Allah will never allow you to trip over His plans. Subhanallah, what a profound reflection. Yes?
I was going to say, over your own garments is also like, so it's your own garments in this dunya, so it's like what you did in this dunya, not like, I guess it's kind of like a metaphor-ish. Like it's talking about like your struggles, your sins that you did, or your lack of doing things over here, because it's talking about your own garments in this dunya.
فِيمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ, right? What your own hands have done, right? And it will never measure up to whatever Allah can do for you, right? And so that every time I neglected Allah, I tripped over my own plans. I tripped over my own things that I thought should have been prioritized over God. But if I only had prioritized Allah, I would have known that everything else would have changed for me. Everything that I thought was difficult would have changed for me. Everything that I thought was impossible would have become possible for me. Today's lesson is very simple. Jama'at, it's very simple. And it is that a person who makes time for Allah, the rest of their world will make time for them. A person who makes time for the world, they will always run out of their time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make time for Allah and Allah will make time for you. Make room for Allah and Allah will always make room for you. Walk towards Allah, Allah will always run towards you. Rely on plans of Allah, and you will see that the few plans that you do make will actually come to fruition. Have hope in Allah, and all of your hopes will be satiated. It is whenever a human being puts their hope in anything other than Allah where they're always ending up being disappointed. So always think about that. And so at the very end, he quotes the last poem. He says, "O you who desire to meet him, the path has been made clear. So why are you tarrying, hesitating, and holding back?" And he mentions this poem, "The path has been made clear to you, O believer, truly. So none who desires you need now to seek." All you have to ask yourself is, do I want Allah? Do I want Allah in my life? Do I want closeness to Him? Because a person who claims these things, they will do the things that will get him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of the people who grow in our proximity closer to Him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of the people who never ever run out of time in our lives for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, our time in fact revolves around Allah ta'ala in the first place. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free the people of Palestine. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve the people of Gaza. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to end this occupation. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to benefit from the iman of the people of Gaza. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reunite these parents and children who were separated in this dunya with greater company in the hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to replace the homes that were lost with homes in paradise. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to exact justice upon the oppressors who harmed His believers, who harmed His worshippers. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that although we will never see true justice in this dunya, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to see true justice in the akhirah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Inshallah, a couple of really cool events coming up, inshallah, in the next couple of days. Tomorrow night, we have a brothers only program after Isha. It'll be here in the Root Space. We're going to be basically kind of like hosting a social, a chance for brothers to get together and spend time with one another. We're going to be rolling out the ping pong tables, inshallah, and PS5s and whatnot, ordering some good food.